Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We got a great viewer question in, and that was really what to do if you feel that you might have the tendencies, characteristics, or personality temperament of being a quiet borderline. And how do you really work through it? How do you improve? How do you improve your inner talk, your inner life, as well as your relationships? And this video content can also go for others who find themselves needing to cope with a quiet borderline individual as well. And realize that the borderline narcissist personality disorder, the borderline, one of the main presenting factors is that of impulsivity, an irrational assessment of oneself. Oftentimes that is self-denigrating, self-loathing, and this in turn causes a need to want to control and kind of emotionally manipulate and rage onto others, or act in sort of very clear-cut black and white thinking. Meaning it's very difficult for you to modulate and moderate the feelings, the assessments that go on in your head. And you feel very much that it is your personality to see things in this way. A lot of it might be negativizing, where you constantly feel, there's a lot of negative, and, you're able to ascertain or determine, this is negative, this is negative, this is negative. And it's very clear cut. In other words, there's a sort of rigidity to the thinking. There's a rigidity to the emotions. And how you know that there is a rigidity is that oftentimes it's very resistant and inflexible, especially to the input of others. In other words, when it's there's a projected sort of mistrust, distrust onto others, but furthermore, a kind of a harsh, edgy assessment of them and their role in your life. So either, you let others flood in, but then lash out, or, you're very pent up emotions, pent up expressions, pent up communication. And then when you do, it's kind of like, here comes this very outpouring of oftentimes very negative versus easygoing, happy-go-lucky, joyful sort of energy. And maybe you want to be more like that. You kind of see that and you kind of envy that, but you also kind of see it as a weakness. And, you tend to engage in a sort of very rigid thought pattern, and it shuts others out. It basically, is kind of like a wall. It just is very inflexible, it's very rigid. And so, one of the things is oftentimes is the stories that you have going on in your mind, what we call schemas or stories, that it's always going to be this way. This is it, that's it. It's very conclusive, very dead end, very that's it. There's not a lot of kind of open entertainment and discussion, and you might be comfortable discussing things like like book reviews or things like this, but when it comes to your own feelings, there's really no way or the highway. It's very cut in stone. And this can be very difficult, not only for the borderline, but for individuals involved. So the first key, of course, is awareness. It's that, this thought pattern, this trait, this temperament, which I'm finding is very rigid in me, is causing me distress. It's causing me unhappiness. It's causing me to feel inner emptiness, or it's causing me to not really like that about myself. And so, rather than being harshly judging and saying, labeling, this is so negative about me and this will never change, realizing, okay, this is I'm easily triggered in this manner. And so you're learning basically a higher role of metacognition, which is the ability to think about your thinking. In other words, I'm talking, but I'm thinking very calm. I'm feeling very calm right now. So my metacognition would go like this. I'm discussing a video on quiet borderline personality disorder and how distressful it can be, not only for that person, but also for others. So while I say that, I can also think, I'm feeling calm, I'm feeling relaxed. I'm looking at both sides of the fence. I'm discussing, what's rigid, what's flexible, and I'm working on definitions of these terms. And I'm also thinking of examples. So that's my ability of metacognition, which all people have. Whether you tap into it and develop it to the certain extent that you do is up to you. But oftentimes it's a skill, a trait, and a habit that needs to be enacted from those individuals who are either suffering from borderline or who are experiencing those others with borderline, to kind of, tap into the metacognition, the ability to think about what you're thinking about, and see, how you can then correct this, modulate it, and become more flexible. So it's kind of like growing a new aspect of yourself. It's developing a new aspect of yourself. It's realizing that you have a lot of abilities, perhaps, that you have untapped into. You have not tapped into this ability to think about to think about yourself, to think about your reaction, to think about your thought patterns, to think about your emotional patterns, and then your behaviors and how you make decisions. And, you might say, well, this is what's always worked for me, and I'm not going to change that. Okay, I'm not going to change that now. Learn to modify some of your self-talk, and learn to modify some of the stories that you are telling yourself, especially those that get you into trouble. So if you find yourself in relationships where, you're constantly pushing people away, or you're causing fights, or you're abusing alcohol, and it's causing a lot of rage, if you can kind of begin real brutally, rigorously honest, which means, okay, just between me, myself, and I, me, myself, and God, me, myself, and my guardian angel, me, myself, and my archangel Michael, whoever your source is. You know what? One thing I do want to change is my proneness to anger, my readiness to anger, how quickly I have a knee-jerk reaction to this. And, and the reason why, I see myself doing this and it makes me unhappy, because I don't like going into these fits of rage. I do things that I regret, that are stupid. People are calling me out on it. Or I don't like that sort of feeling anymore. It's causing me trouble. And I don't like to think that way. I want to become more flexible. So that awareness first, and then that desire has to be, part of you moving forward. So you have to be in touch with that desire, and then get just kind of a big picture, metacognitive view. And likewise, if you're dealing with someone who is borderline, use your ability to use your own role of metacognition and say, okay, here it comes, and how can I protect myself? Or what is the vision for my next action steps when this comes? How can I further protect